As the clock struck 11:45 p.m., Marcus, the lone delivery driver, took another deep breath, the cool night air rushing in through his van's cracked window. He checked the GPS once again. It was directing him down an unfamiliar, winding road. He was used to the long shifts, the solitary nights spent delivering packages to isolated homes, but tonight felt different. Something was off. He rubbed his eyes, feeling the weight of exhaustion on his shoulders. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and the distant chirp of crickets. After another long day, this was his last stop, an old mansion on the outskirts of town. He'd never been to this part of the city before, and there was something about the place that made his skin crawl. The mansion stood against the sky, tall and imposing, its windows dark, almost like black eyes staring down at him. Marcus had been told this house didn't get deliveries very often. In fact, it seemed like nobody had been there in ages. He shook off the unease and parked in the driveway, the headlights briefly illuminating the stone steps leading up to the front door. The porch was overgrown, vines and moss creeping up the cracked pillars. It looked like a place forgotten by time. But the address was clear, and he had a job to do. As Marcus stepped out of the van, he heard the creaking of the old wooden gate swinging open behind him. He flinched but turned to find nothing there, just the faint sound of the wind. Shaking his head, he moved toward the front door, the shadows of the trees stretching long in the moonlight. He knocked, no answer. He rang the doorbell, still nothing. A chill ran down his spine as he stood there, frozen. Something about the air felt wrong. He glanced down at the package in his hand, a small box wrapped in plain brown paper. It was the last item for tonight. All he needed to do was drop it off and leave. Easy, right? He knocked again, a little harder this time, but it echoed in the quiet night, louder than before. Still, no one answered. His hand trembled as he reached for the doorknob. The door swung open with an eerie screech. Marcus hesitated for a moment before stepping inside, the faint smell of mildew and old wood filling his nostrils. The house was dark, save for the dim light coming from a flickering candle on a table by the door. As he stepped further in, the floorboards creaked under his weight. He called out, "Hello?" There was no response. He set the package on the table near the door, the candlelight flickering, casting unsettling shadows across the walls. He turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind him with a violent thud. Panic surged through him. "Hello?" he called again, his voice shaking now. "I need to go." His heart raced as he backed toward the door, his eyes darting around the room. The shadows seemed to move, shifting unnaturally, as though something was lurking just out of sight. His skin prickled with the sense that he was being watched. Then he heard it, a soft whisper. It was faint, but unmistakable. His name. Marcus. The voice sounded distant, almost like it was coming from behind the walls. His pulse quickened. He was about to reach for the door when the candlelight flickered once more, and in that brief instant, he saw it. A figure standing at the far end of the hallway. Tall, thin, draped in tattered clothes, with hollow eyes that stared directly at him. Marcus froze, his blood running cold. The figure didn't move. It simply stood there, watching. Who are you?" Marcus stammered, but the figure didn't answer. It only began to drift slowly towards him, its movements unnatural, gliding across the floor like it was floating. He stumbled backward, his breathing erratic. The door behind him wouldn't budge. He pulled at the handle, desperate, but it was locked, sealed shut. The figure was getting closer now. Marcus could feel the temperature drop, his breath coming out in visible puffs as the air grew colder, heavier. "Marcus!" the voice whispered again, this time closer in his ear. He spun around, but no one was there. Suddenly, the house seemed to come alive with a chorus of whispers. They were everywhere, around him, behind him, under him. The walls began to pulse as though the house itself was breathing. The shadows grew thicker, and the floor beneath his feet felt unstable, shifting. He looked down to find the dark wood cracking, splitting open as if the house itself was trying to swallow him whole. Marcus panicked, his mind racing as he searched for an escape. He had to leave. He had to get out of there. Just as he thought he might be able to make a break for it, the temperature plummeted. He looked up to find the figure directly in front of him now, its hollow eyes inches from his face. A cold, damp breath blew across his skin, sending him into a state of paralysis. Then, as if it was all a bad dream, the lights flickered out, plunging him into total darkness. The whispers grew louder, deafening now, until it was all he could hear, drowning him in their maddening chant. Stay, forever, stay, forever. The last thing Marcus saw before the darkness consumed him were the hollow eyes of the figure, glowing faintly in the blackness. Then, everything went silent. The next morning, the mansion stood still, as it always had. No one would know what happened to Marcus, the delivery driver who was never heard from again. But on the table, by the front door, the small brown package sat untouched. The name on it? Mr. Blackburn.